I'm getting over a cold today, so bear with me. My nose is a little bit stuffy, so I might sound weird, so I apologize in advance. So apparently Sony found their next big game, the Star Wars of PlayStation, some would say, and then they shut it down 2 weeks after launch. It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the Star Wars news. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm really here to talk about the next Star Wars of gaming, Concord. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the short-lived 2-week life of the game Concord, but now we finally have some additional information about how the game was perceived behind the scenes before it came out, and maybe why Sony was so disappointed in its performance. So this information is coming from Colin Moriarty. According to the comicbook.com article, he's a former IGN journalist, founder of Last Stand Media, and one of the leading experts on PlayStation. So according to Moriarty, Concord cost $400 million to make and was Sony's most expensive game to date. The budget reportedly came from outsourcing development. Sony reportedly began helping Firewalk with the game in 2020 when it was already in development. And the article mentions like getting help later in development is going to be more costly, especially when you're outsourcing. Now the budget is one thing, but the other thing that's coming out about this game was the attitude around the game internally. So it's being reported that Sony believed this game would be huge, like the next Star Wars of games for them. Moriarty is also claiming that he spoke to developers and behind the scenes they weren't even allowed to say anything negative about the game. But ultimately, again, according to this reporting, they spent $400 million on the game and it only made $1 million after its launch. I mean, granted, they did take the game offline in 2 weeks, but Sony is used to selling millions in the first couple of weeks of their games, not a single million. But basically, if this is true, then they lost the entire budget that they spent on this game. But of course, there's also the fallout from this that Firewalk is probably going to sue the studio that made the game. We saw Sony start to break up Bungie after they failed to meet some of their goals, and so now the people at Firewalk are worried about their future within Sony, especially after Concord's director, Ryan Ellis, apparently stepped down and is moving back to a support role within the studio. So this reporting originated from Kotaku, but now it's being reported basically by every major outlet, that Ryan Ellis basically stepped down, and people within the studio are worried that Sony may either, close them or turn them into a co-development studio. So yeah, overall, it seems like the fallout from Concord isn't over, at least for Firewalk. Now the thing I found weird about this whole situation is, I really don't feel like Sony really promoted this game that much. I saw some of the same things in the comments of the videos I posted about the shutdown. I only knew about it because some of the podcasts I listened to mentioned that it was getting lukewarm reception during the betas, but outside of that, I don't know anyone in real life who ever talked about Concord, even after it came out. So all the stuff with Sony thinking it's the next big thing for them and the Star Wars of PlayStation, it doesn't really seem to add up when they didn't seem to really promote it that much, and they shut it down within 2 weeks. Now, Horizon is a franchise that Sony markets and treats well. They even did an exclusive VR game for the PSVR 2, the upcoming LEGO Horizon game, and there's a multiplayer game that's in development, so clearly they were putting a lot of stock into the series. So after all that, I know a lot of people are wondering, well, what's next for the series? Well, I say sometimes it's good to just go back to square one and reevaluate, and that's what Sony may be doing according to this ratings leak from the ESRB. So it's being speculated that Sony is releasing Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered for PC and PS5 due to a description given to the ESRB for one of their upcoming games. The description mentions Aloy and her learning how to hunt robotic creatures in the wild, which, yeah, that sounds a lot like what you did in the first game. So yeah, this Sony Remastered thing is getting weird. I know that Horizon came out in 2017 for PS4, and the PC version came out in 2020, and the game, today, it still looks good. They also did a PS5 upgrade for this, so it runs at 60, so it's just weird in my opinion to remaster a game that's not that old. But then again, they did remaster The Last of Us Part 2 that came out in 2020, so why am I surprised by this? This one is on me, I should have known better. But it makes sense when you think about it. Sony is working on their upcoming system, the PlayStation 6, so they need to make sure that these games are ready for the future. So I know the PS5 Pro hasn't come out yet, but let's talk about the PS6 for a little bit. So this news has been going around this week, but it was actually from 2022. So basically Sony was shopping around for who was going to make the SoC for the PlayStation 6. Both the PS4 and PS5 use AMD chips, but they were in talk with Intel for the PS6. But reportedly they have decided to stick with AMD, and one of the primary reasons is that because it would have made backwards compatibility a lot more difficult since they would have been switching architectures. So the news doesn't really mean that the PS6 is coming soon. The Polygon article even points out that most of the time console makers are working on the next console the day after the current one launches. So it would make sense that they would have already locked down who was going to make the SoC for the PS6 a couple of years ago. Just like I'm sure Xbox is probably in the same boat. They probably had their SoC locked down. And I'm sure Nintendo's probably in the same boat too. They probably already picked an SoC from like 10 years ago that they're going to get for $2 each. And speaking of Nintendo, it looks like they're ready to take the fight to Palworld. I covered Palworld back when it first blew up. and essentially it was getting a lot of comparisons to Pokemon due to the character designs. I did play quite a bit of the game, and it's really a completely different game gameplay-wise from the Pokemon games, but on the surface, yeah, it looks a lot like Pokemon when it comes to the design of the creatures. Now, of course, at the time, people were wondering, is Nintendo or the Pokemon Company going to try to do anything about this? And basically, they said that they were looking into it, and that was all. They basically went silent. Palworld's massive popularity died down a little bit since then. It's still doing well, but it's not as huge as it was earlier this year. Well, now Nintendo has finally decided to sue Pocket Pair, Palworld's creators, for infringement on multiple patents. Now, the lawsuit hasn't laid out which patents they're referring to. Pocket Pair put out a statement basically saying that they don't even know which patents that they're referring to. But essentially, they said they're going to keep supporting their game and, quote, ensure that indie developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. So right now, we don't know which patents Nintendo is specifically suing them for, but GameSpot has an article where they spoke to analyst Sirkan Toto, and he speculates that Nintendo will probably win this because patents are very technical, and they use this tactic to win a similar lawsuit in 2018 where developer Coldpool, I hope I said that right, had to pay them $30 million and now has to pay them licensing fees to use their specific patents. Also, Nintendo goes to court a lot and they always try to fight somebody, so we'll see how this turns out for Pocket Pair. I think with the limited information available, it's pretty hard to say what their chance of winning is right now. But either way, Nintendo will be winning pretty soon, at least when it comes to their revenue, with the Switch 2 coming soon. In fact, that's what we're talking about today. And our final story. So it's that time again for more Switch 2 leaks and rumors. And this time, baby, this time, we got some pictures. I don't know where that came from, I'm sorry. So to do a quick recap of the rumors so far, the Switch 2 is basically supposed to have an 8-inch display that's supposed to be an LCD with magnetically attaching Joy-Cons. It's basically going to be very similar to the current Switch. It's also rumored to be backwards compatible with Switch games, and it's going to use a newer NVIDIA chip that's going to use DLSS for upscaling, but its base performance without upscaling is expected to be around the PS4. Now, with that being said, we haven't actually seen anything on how the system will actually look until now, so there are renders of the Switch 2 that allegedly leaked from a factory in China. It's supposed to be from the prototype of the Switch 2, but yet it basically looks like what's being described with the larger screen. It looks like it has the Switch OLED style kickstand that goes all the way across the back, which is way better than the original kickstand, so I'm glad they're keeping that. And it has the magnetically attaching Joy-Cons as rumored. And yeah, it basically looks like a Switch, but a little bit bigger. I'm sure whatever Nintendo's next system is, it's basically gonna look like their current system with some small changes, which is what these renders look like anyway. But I guess we'll have to wait until Nintendo makes their official announcement, whenever that is. But let me know in the comments how you feel about these alleged Switch 2 renders. Again, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And always do at least 2 things at the same time.